Hey Future Fitness Pro, welcome to the ultimate study guide for passing your NASM CPT exam. In this 5-part series, I'm going to be running you through absolutely everything that you need to focus on and know in order to crush your exam and get certified. And if you stick around throughout each of our 5 videos, which I recommend, you're going to get access to a lot of free study resources and downloads as well. Speaking of which, here's your first freebie. We put together a PDF study guide that serves as a companion resource to this 5-part video series. So I want you to finish the entire video with me, but either pause the video now or make sure and go back to the description when you're done so you can get your hands on it. So this video isn't about me, it's about you, but if you're wondering who is this guy and why should I listen, my name's Coach Joe Drake. I'm the CEO and the founder of the Axiom Fitness Academy, and we're one of the top NASM licensed partner academies in the world with literally thousands of students out there who've used our materials to get certified. So not only have I been teaching this stuff and training trainers since 2012, but I'm also an outside consultant for NASM, and they hire me to come in and create new content for trainers like you. So when I tell you that this is the most complete study guide you will find anywhere, even better than the paid ones out there, I mean it. And I create content like this because I believe in you. I've been waking up every day for the last 16 years, absolutely in love with what I do, and I want you to be able to experience the same thing. But as you're watching this video right now, you might feel like you're staring at Mount Everest and you have no idea where to even begin or how to approach studying. I got you. Let's dive in. So before we dive into all the details of section 1 and 2 in this part 1 of our 5-video series, I want to make sure you guys are keeping the big picture in mind, how much of each section you really need to know. And that's why in this first part, we put sections 1 and 2 together to make sure you guys have even distribution as we go throughout this series. So you may or may not have seen this inside of other resources, but we know as you're gonna go through and take your exam, we know literally exactly how many questions are gonna come from each content area. And the reason that this is important, not because we're trying to memorize questions, but one of the biggest struggles for so many students, maybe like you, is knowing what to focus on most, knowing where to put your energy in. And as you're starting out in the study process, right, we're in the beginning, we're in part 1, I want to make sure you guys are using your time appropriately and effectively. So like I mentioned, the rest of our video here today is going to be on sections 1 and section 2, which is really just the first 4 chapters of material. I can tell you from experience over the last 10+ years training students in the NASM curriculum, this is not usually where students struggle the most. So hopefully this is going to be a nice, easy entry point for you into the information. Now, when we get a little further along, it's going to change a little bit. You're going to find a lot more stuff that you need to know inside of each chapter. But the cool part is we know from the distribution from NASM, every one of you is going to have different questions, but you're going to have the same number from each content area. So as we go throughout our video today, we're going to get about 10 questions that come from chapters 1 and 2. We're going to get about 15 questions that come from chapters 3 and 4. So even within this video, part 1, you can already see that when it comes to the amount of time I need to spend studying certain topics, you're probably going to want to put a little bit more time into chapters 3 and 4. There's going to be some more detailed concepts that are going to come up on the exam. And the same thing as we go further along. Most people, you might be watching this video and you're like, man, I hope he talks about chapter 5 and chapter 7 at some point because I'm totally lost. So many people feel that way. My reminder to you is that all of chapters 5 through 10 are weighted the exact same as just chapters 3 and 4. So although there's a lot of science and physiology that's covered in our next series, you're only going to get 15 questions. Section 4, as we get into assessments, you guys will get 16 questions. Section 5, now we're moving on into real training, right? This is like the tactical strategies, core training, plyometric, biggest section of the exam. NASM is telling you up front, this matters most as a new certified personal trainer, 24 questions there. And then as we move toward the end, which is bringing together programming, special populations, different equipment, you'll get about 20 questions there. So don't hesitate to refer back to this. You'll see a version of this inside of the downloadable study guide that I mentioned, so you make sure you're spending your time appropriately. So let's dive into the actual material now. We jump into section 1, which is chapters 1 and 2. Probably the easiest content in the entire curriculum. I'm going to say it right now. Most people, by the time you go through this material once, you've probably got the level of information that you need. That may differ a little bit with the anatomy, the physiology that you need to hear and see multiple times. And so throughout this process, I'm going to tell you things that you need to spend a lot of time on, and then certain things where you need to have recognition level knowledge. And many of the things that are in chapters 1 and 2 are probably more recognition level knowledge that you're going to be able to figure out the first time. One of the first concepts that you want to pay attention to inside of chapter 1 is this concept of evidence-based practice. And really what they do is they talk about how do you take the science and research that's out there, blend that together with your experience as a coach and trainer, and also deliver that to the values of the clients that you have. They also start to introduce the OPT model, and although this chapter itself doesn't go into great detail, I would suggest that you yourself dive into the OPT model. We've got other videos that explain this at greater depth, because mastering the OPT model early on is going to help you much more as you get into later chapters. This chapter also works to establish the need for coaches and trainers like you out there helping people. They talk quite a bit about the global state of health and wellness, so make sure you do pay attention to some of the statistics that they talk about in relation to physical inactivity and the relationship between that and chronic and acute disease. Although this chapter doesn't go into great depth and detail about anatomy and physiology, they do start to refer to chronic musculoskeletal dysfunctions. This is a big piece that's going to come up inside of chapters like 11 and 12 with the assessments. And so they're just setting the stage for understanding what are the most common injuries and issues that clients might be dealing with when they're coming into the gym. I also like in this chapter, they start to give you some information on what they call the allied healthcare continuum. And from an exam standpoint, what you need to know is the separation of roles and responsibilities between personal trainers, physical therapists, chiropractors, essentially understanding where we fit in. But I really like this topic because as you get out there and you start working with clients, they're gonna need these people in other areas of their life. The last piece inside of chapter 1 you're gonna wanna make sure you review is gonna be the NASM scope of practice. Not only is this a really popular one that comes up with questions on the exam, but it's also gonna help make sure you understand what you can and you can't do as a certified personal trainer. Chapter 2 on the personal training profession tends to not be the most stressful portion of the exam, but I can tell you from experience, this is the stuff that causes a lot of trainers to fail in the beginning. So while you're going through and you're learning the information for the exam, be thinking about these things beyond your certification. And the first one, probably one of the most important, impactful ones as a new trainer, is where are you gonna work? What are the job opportunities that are out there in the fitness industry? And they talk about the benefits and drawbacks of working in a large club, big box gym, working in a boutique studio, training clients online, going to people in home. There are so many ways that we get to serve clients as a personal trainer, but where you get started is gonna be pretty important. The sales information inside of this chapter is pretty basic, but what you need to know is the 3 steps in the sales process that NASM talks about. The first one, prospecting. How do I get more people in front of me? The second one being building rapport, building those connections, especially inside of first sessions. And then the third one, asking for the sale. It's debatable how helpful these are in the real world, but as far as the exam goes, you do want to make sure you understand what a SWOT analysis is and the 4 Ps of marketing. And the last part of chapter 2, sealing up section 1, is make sure you're familiar with your CEU requirements and the fact that you need to get 2.0, which is about 20 hours of continuing education every 2 years. You're doing great. We're moving now into section 2, which is going to be chapters 3 and 4. And this is the juicy stuff. This is human psychology, behavioral change. And not only is this going to be weighted heavier on the exam, we're now going to get 15 questions from these 2 chapters. But I can tell you from working with clients for a long time, this is real coaching. This is the stuff that matters most. So although there's only 15 questions on your exam, I would recommend that once you're done and certified, this is an area of ongoing learning that's absolutely transformed my coaching career. Chapter 3, the psychology of exercise. One of the most important initial concepts they dive into is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And as you talk about these things, it's not one is bad or one is good, but it's really what's driving the person you have in front of you. And as a coach, how can you use this over time to get more out of your clients? Then they also go into common barriers of exercise. What are the things that might be holding people back from training with you? You want to have a working knowledge of the difference between outcome and process-based goals. Not only for your exam, but this is one that's really helpful on a day-to-day. When you get clients who come in, they've got this big overarching goal that's hard to keep top of mind on a daily basis. So we can set up these little process goals like making it into the gym 3 times a week that'll keep them motivated. I'm also going to give you a very specific page number, page 71, table 3-2. This is one you're going to want to know in order to make sure you understand how to differentiate different types of social support. This last one might be a little bit common sense. You probably could figure it out, but you're going to want to make sure you know the psychological benefits of exercise that they list in this chapter. There's some great stuff covered in chapter 4, behavioral coaching, but one that every time I've taken the exam, and at this stage I've taken the exam maybe like 8 or 9 times, so I know what's on it. these stages of change, your trans-theoretical model, will absolutely come up. So make sure you not only know the different stages of change inside this model, but also how to apply different strategies based on where clients are. Building off the trans-theoretical model, you're gonna wanna make sure that you are familiar with the behavior change techniques that are listed in Table 4-1. Make sure you're pretty comfortable with the information surrounding SMART goal setting. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. They give you a fair amount of examples so that you could determine if someone's goal actually fits these criteria. This chapter also introduces a really powerful concept called motivational interviewing. This is an entire field of psychology, and so although they only introduce a couple of strategies like making sure we're using the right language with clients, this has a lot to do with long-term coaching and drawing more out of people. So if you find this area interesting, just know this is an opportunity for ongoing learning. Hey, you made it to the end of part 1 of our 5-part study guide. I'm proud of you. And the fact that you're still here with me watching tells me that you don't want to just skate by and barely pass your exam. You really want to understand how to apply what you're learning and become a great personal trainer. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's hard to do on your own. So in addition to the free study guide that I mentioned at the start of this video, we also have a free Facebook group with a couple thousand people from around the world just like you. So if you don't want to feel alone in the process and you want to be able to ask questions, make sure you follow the link below so you can apply for access. And now, let's move on to part 2.